Welcome back to the Seraphine podcast. I'm Seraphine Arocha, and this is part 2 of my 3-part series with Brady Hester. Hello.
Hello, great to be back.
It's good to have you. Well, I'd love to have my listeners get to know a little bit more about my marketing guru. So if you could kind of give listeners a little bit of your background and why, you got into marketing and podcast marketing specifically.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think you've even heard of some of the things I'm about to
give
background on.
I'm learning
this
myself.
will be funny.
Yeah.
So I actually went to college studying public relations. I thought I was going to get involved in sports. All my PR for professors said you'll hate sports if you get involved in it. So didn't go that route, but I got into PR. But then while I was there, all the internship opportunities were really geared toward marketing.
Yeah.
So I'm getting an education more on the communications, the media side of things. But then on the marketing side, I discovered that I love being able to back up what I can do with numbers. Data analysis is super crucial and being able to showcase what you can do and how you can execute. And so from there, it's pretty interesting. I kind of set myself up to work in podcasting because the PR side of things is heavy communications, media relations, but I also have the marketing side to be able to get eyeballs and attention on whatever we're doing. So really from there, I started getting clients in college, super aggressive. I always wanted to be able to work for myself and do things on my own. So podcasting was one of the first things I got into and was really excited about. And it's really grown from there. First, really just testing it out with myself and then picking up clients and working in that space more and more. It's just such a natural fit.
That's what I loved about you when I first met you, is that you actually have your own podcast. And granted, you've talked to me, you're like, oh, I'm not paying that much attention to it right now because I'm paying attention to my clients.
Yeah.
But it's so cool to know that you've actually been out there and done it, because I'm like, how do you market something if you haven't done it yourself, or you don't believe in the product or know the ins and outs of it? And you've really given me a lot of insight. Plus, you've spent a lot of hours listening to podcasts.
Yes.
And I think that that's so important when you are thinking about launching a podcast or even a YouTube channel, is really doing the work of listening, figuring out what appeals to you, and learning from the best of the best. I mean, I'm constantly listening to podcasts and trying to understand what brings me back every single time,
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I was just thinking about this recently. I doubt anybody is on YouTube more than I am between work and listening.
Yeah.
I'm on YouTube all day, every day.
That's crazy. It's so weird to think about to be experts in our field, what we have to do.
Yeah.
And for you, it's been on YouTube. Well, this episode is focused on you're winning the attention battle. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to not gain attention. Basically, confusing your audience, having content that's really not attention grabbing, and going about it in a way to where you lose your listener within the first few minutes, or not even the first minute. You can lose them in the few first seconds. So talk to me a little bit about what you have seen. You can use me as an example of where it's we needed to pivot.
Yeah, so there are a few big things. I mean, starting with what not to do.
Yeah.
And it's tough, I think, and using yourself as an example in the Seraphine podcast, a lot of times I feel like listeners would go into some of the earlier episodes not understanding what it's about.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, then getting into what to do, establishing the clear direction of each episode or each video is super valuable. So people know what they're getting into, and they'll give each episode more of a chance. And that's something we've seen lately with Seraphine podcasts, is having so much success is being really targeted with what we're doing, who we're reaching, and it's been really effective.
And having a clear vision. I think, one thing that I realized with the first company I worked with, that was a marketing company, she talked to me a lot about what was my avatar. And I was like, what the fuck is an avatar? And I thought about the frickin' James Cameron movie, but honestly, that's exactly what it is. It's if someone was going to make like a hyper like cartoon version of you, what are like the 3 pillars of the Seraphine podcast? So, I had a hard time honing it in because I'm like ADHD girl, but once I got down to it and I really thought about the things that really stirred me, I really am affected first and foremost by conversation and talking in a space to where it feels safe. So that's why I like film, I like TV, I like art, is a lot of times we can address certain things that may be controversial or may feel weird or awkward. But because we watched a piece of film or we listened to a joke that made us see things in a different light, or a song, it's easier to talk about the topic under the veil of the entertainment. Then it was getting to know people who are experts in their fields and what they're trying to do to make the world a little bit better in their community. And then I think finally it was just connection was so huge. So that was important to me. I think to gain attention. So we talked first. We're talking first about how not to gain attention, and not gaining attention clearly is you're all over the place, but how to gain attention. What is your biggest pieces of advice?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different directions we could go with this one. So keeping attention is one of the more challenging things. I mean, I kind of already mentioned how to get it up front, which is establishing what the video is about. People that are into that topic will give it a chance. Mm-hmm. But, you really want to keep a really tight-knit, be really concise with your answers and in a format like this, and just keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
Maybe it involves some B-roll too, some different things visually if you're on YouTube to keep the conversation going, and really whatever you can do to keep eyeballs or keep ears listening. It's something to play around with.
Make it concise. That's one thing I learned. I started out doing like an hour, and it was great. I mean, I had fun in the actual interview, but listening to it was painful. And I think that's what I'm realizing more than ever, is to get to the point. And also, I'll a lot of times sit down with my guest, if it's a person I've never sat down with, to go over what we're talking about. I think that's one key thing if you are going to take it into an interview format, is to know your key talking points, because a lot of people haven't been behind a mic and they get off topic, and you've got to hone them back in, and you'll lose your audience right away, or you have to have an incredible editor, which is Aaron, but he's got to go through all the footage and be like, okay, we got to cut that out. So that, to me, having a real clear purpose to gain attention is key. The third one is podcast versus YouTube, audio only versus video. We talked a little bit about this in Riches Are in the Niches. That's part 1 of our series. If you haven't listened to it, please do. But you have to understand that podcast format is audio. It's just audio, and you have to have these moments of peaking and flowing. You have to have cadence. I can't stress in your voice. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to a podcast and fallen asleep.
Yeah.
And then with YouTube, make it interesting. I mean, I love our set here, but in the next breath, it's like you can only watch yourself in a chair for so long, and then I'm like, I don't want to frickin' watch it. So your attention span is gone. So how about what do you suggest with podcast versus YouTube?
Yeah, it's funny in this case because, and I'm always thinking on the audience's end. Mm-hmm. It depends on the podcaster. Maybe their audience is really visual, mm-hmm. and they, even if they just want to see the people talk and there's not a ton of B-roll.
Yeah.
That those nonverbals are really important to them, and they want to see the people that they're listening to. Or maybe some audiences don't care and they just want to gain the information and just download it. They might just listen to podcasts. So that's another one to just test out. YouTube, I'm kind of biased, but there's just so many more opportunities with YouTube to be more flexible with content.
Yeah.
With the visual opportunities there. And it's a fun way to engage too. I don't think a lot of people value YouTube as a social media platform, which it really is.
It really is.
So you could put up a 2-minute bite-sized piece of content, just checking in with your audience, seeing what they're up to, and giving them a piece of information, which that doesn't really make sense to do on a podcast platform. They could watch you go around the city or give them a behind the scenes. And so YouTube has so many different opportunities, and if you're somebody that's creative and want to explore more outlets, YouTube's the place for it.
I agree with you completely. When I started out the podcast, I have all these different interests, and one of the things I love is I love fashion, and I love accessories and jewelry, and Dylan Lex is one of my favorite. I mean, I'm covered in it right now. The problem is it doesn't compute. It doesn't translate on podcasts.
No.
So when I talk about like the amazing stuff my guests are wearing or the jewelry that they have on, like no one can see it. So I realize with the YouTube channel, that's going to be it's so fun and exciting to know now that again, in your brain, you're not thinking it because you're talking about it and you're like, they can click on it on YouTube. But a lot of people are just listening. So you have to be constantly thinking about what it is, the content, and if it's going to translate just audio versus visually.
Definitely.
The fourth one is advantages and opportunities with video content. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to the flexibility side of things, it's so much easier to show rather than tell. I mean, to explain to people something your guest is wearing or really anything on a podcast could take 1,000 words when you could just show them the video on YouTube or whatever platform you're utilizing. So, it just goes back to versatility.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot more options, and you're not limited to just the podcast type on YouTube.
And I think the other thing is you have to be confident in your language. I think if you're not an orator, if you're not someone who is comfortable speaking, describing, a podcast format probably isn't for you. It's going to be more visual, but you have to really know what you're going to say and then also cut it off, because I think that you can overtalk it and confuse your audience as well.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And in some cases, maybe you do have a podcast and video platform on YouTube, but maybe some episodes are only fit for YouTube or only for podcasts.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're really separate audiences, so you can cater to each. And yeah.
So the fifth one is video styles that perform. This is winning your attention battle. So when we're in this trying to win your audience's attention, what do you think are the best kind of video styles for people to emulate or think about producing?
Yeah, I mean, I heavily lean to bite size.
Mm-hmm.
People are busy. They might not have time to sit down and watch an hour-long episode of something, but if you can split it up into 3 10-minute videos and spread that over time, people are a lot more likely to get through all of that rather than sit down and watch a full 30 minutes at once. And the thing is with that too, you can really be more specific with each video, which we'll get into this later, but provides different SEO and marketing opportunities. So definitely be more bite-sized. Really just get straight to the point, even on video.
Easy for consumption.
Yeah.
It's like anything. If you go to like a Buca de Beppo versus like a tapas restaurant, it's like it's easier to just little bites here and there to figure out what you like, as opposed to the big family style meal where like, at the end. I think it goes right in hand. It goes right hand in hand with what you choose to put out content wise. I think try the tapas style. Then, when you've decided you want to dig deep on a topic, maybe that's a bigger, I don't know what you want to say. Maybe it's a series of videos, but you really should think about, again, keeping that audience stimulated and hitting that play button and not stopping or pausing.
Right. And especially when you're trying to attract new viewers, they're much more likely to give you a chance if they see, this is 10 minutes versus 60 minutes.
Totally.
That's not really a test run at that point. Those longer episodes are more for the dedicated fans, which has value too, but
fans are earned.
Yeah.
I can tell you that right now. Well, with that, I'm going to cut us off because we're probably making you start to look at your watch at this moment. With that, if you liked what you heard today, click subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave any comments that you might have for me and Brady, any questions. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for joining us on the Seraphiend Podcast.